that white nose disease?
There's all sorts of things that are going on. People are looking at various chemicals, but it's going to be a very, very difficult thing. Research takes a long time. And one of the problems that is happening is we're running out of sources of unaffected bats. So if you're going to do a scientific study to show that something works, you have to be able to take unaffected bats, apply the disease organism to some and not to the others, and then apply your chemical. And it has come down the Appalachians, it has turned west, it is now it's in Kentucky, it's in Indiana, it's in Tennessee. The last bastion of unaffected bats is northern Wisconsin and Michigan. Oh, like her.
I was wondering if there's any governmental agencies or even non-governmental agencies like the Nature Conservancy or Sierra Club or anybody who's given a statement on the effect of wind farms. You know, we hear about people going down into South America to save the rainforest, and I don't know that I've heard of any.
Well, I know people in the Fish and Wildlife Service are aware of it. Whether anybody's gone to Congress and testified, I don't know. I know they have gone for white nose syndrome, and I'm sure that the double whammy of white nose syndrome and wind farms came up, but I don't know that for a fact. But there are conservation organizations that are aware and are trying to do things, both on white nose syndrome and wind power. And again, it's not that I don't think most people are against wind power per se. It's just the idea that with cooperation we can reduce the effect on our bats.
You said the Indiana brown bat is federally protected.
The Indiana bat is on the federal list of endangered species.
Okay, how is that bat actually protected against wind turbines?
I wish I had a representative here. My understanding is that the Endangered Species Act doesn't really apply because there supposedly is no federal permit or federal money involved, so like money from the federal government to put these things up. If there was federal money involved or it was on federal property, then they are required to consult with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on endangered species. Since there is no federal nexus, as they say, they are not required. Many of them are trying to act in good faith and inquire what the Fish and Wildlife Service wants. But the Fish and Wildlife Service, I do not believe can insist. Now, what would happen if it gets put up and an Indiana bat gets killed? I think that there would be consequences. And I think that that's why, another reason why they're acting in good faith and going to the Fish and Wildlife Service.
How did you know originally to start to look here for the bats? They just picked some points out on a map and said, let's go?
I just drove by and I said, wow, look at this. This looks cool. Basically, I had a graduate student that was mimicking my master's thesis from the late 70s, going around the southern part of the state trying to find Indiana bats. And so you focus on wooded areas. And I had not done much in Leonard County. I had been on the Raisin, closer to Adrian, but I had not been down this way. And I was too young and underfunded, and I didn't have topographic maps, we didn't have satellite photos, and so I had no idea that you had this beautiful floodplain down here. So I was driving around, I saw the green on the map, and then I came to check it out.
What would you think it would help if they did like a setback from the Raisin River?
Yeah, my personal opinion is that yes, there should be setbacks. My personal opinion is that there should be studies on these bats. The thing that we did not do is foraging on these animals. How far away from the river do they fly every single night? I think that those kinds of studies should be done. And based upon those studies, they should determine what the setbacks are. So if you find out that these bats are consistently foraging 1 to 2 miles away from the river, then my opinion would be that you back off and put them 1 to 2 miles away. If you find out that they never leave, then maybe you can put them a little bit closer. But then you do have to worry about the migration as well. If they're using the Raisin River as a migratory corridor, then you could have setbacks from that. If they're not using it, you have what the birders call broad front migration, where they just come everywhere is just as likely, then it doesn't matter on your setbacks because they'll be coming down and encountering that wind
The studies you just mentioned as far as determining some of those types of things, of how far they're going out, what would be involved in doing something? What would be if a developer chose to do something like that, what would be the timeline and the process as far as you understand it?
Well, it depends on how much money you put into it as to how quickly the data could be accumulated. You know, that would be a perfect a couple master's theses, because you have more than one species that would be involved. A master's thesis could potentially be done in 1 summer, or it could be done in 2 summers. A lot of them, all of them do hire their environmental consulting firms. I mean, I've been hired by wind farm companies to do surveys. And so that would be a little bit different, because they would probably charge more and have full-time employees and maybe get the job done a little bit quicker. You could get that kind of information in 1 summer, at least some data in 1 summer. We already know where the bats are, we already know what they're eating.
Do you know of any studies that might be in the near future, since it's been a while since the last study was done and we have more dead ash trees?
Well, I would say a couple things along the lines there. It's been 4 years, I think, since we worked here. The bats are still there. I would be totally amazed if they were not. Bats are very site loyal. So they will come back even to the same dead tree every year. Now, dead trees fall over. And so they are used to switching from roost tree to roost tree. But what we found is that they'll switch their roosting location, but it'll still be within their home range. And so they're probably there. I would just be flabbergasted.
I'm just thinking there's probably more.
There could be more bats, because there is better habitat. I mean, that really struck me. You can see all these dead ash trees. It not only provides more roosting areas, but it also opens up the forest. And the Indiana bat and the little brown bat and the northern bat, less so. Indiana bat, it doesn't like real dense forests for flying in, nor does the little brown bat. They're not as maneuverable. Northern bat can handle it a little bit better, but probably the foraging habitat for all 3 of those species have been improved by the death of these green ash trees, removing all of those branches and stuff.
Has the study, or will the study go any further than just along the shoulder road like that? My son lives over here on Bear Creek, and bats are all over town at his place.
Well, it depends on the company and the environmental consultants that they've hired. I do know that one of the companies was planning on going along Bear Creek. I talked to another one this morning. They were doing 24 sites approximately. A certain number of those were associated with woodlots, but the majority of them were with riparian areas. So if it's within their boundaries, I would assume that they would map along Bear Creek. If that's the major stream within the boundaries, that's where I would head to immediately.
I live at the end of Thompson Highway by the state line there, and we have bats that come to our pond. So where do they actually live? They go back in the woods to the dead trees? Where do they come from?
Well, that's just it. You know, you got 9 species in the area. 7 of them live in trees. 2 of them just roost among the leaves. 2 of them are potentially going to be in buildings. And the others are either going to be in hollow trees or underneath the loose bark of dead trees.
Well, we live next to 10 Mile Creek down there, and there's a bridge that goes over it, and every summer they're hanging from the bottom of the bridge. Now,
Oh, I got to talk to you. Is this in Ohio or Michigan?
Yeah, this was just across the state line in Ohio, yes.
There is a bridge around here too that bats are in. I won't tell you which one, but they are in these drainages. That's very unusual. This is the only bridge roost that I'm aware of in the state of Michigan. It does happen more often in other states where it's a little bit warmer. And in other states, very often, bridges can be used as what we call night roosts. So the bats will leave their roost tree where they spent the whole day, and then they'll go off and forage for a couple of hours, and then they'll go someplace and just hang up and digest, rest, and converse with their friends, and then go back out again.
So we're probably getting the bats from Ohio then?
No telling.
From the bridge? Okay.
No telling.
Are the bats more of like a group animal? Do they like to?
Yeah, with 1,200 species, you have all sorts of social systems, but you have ones like the red bat and the hoary bat that they are solitary, except the mom and her young. But then the big brown bat at common colony size, and it's the most common bat in buildings down here, common colony size is 50. And little brown bat, typical colony is 100 to 300. They're not common around in southern Michigan because we're so far from the lines and caves, but we do have them very close to us.
A couple of years ago, we lived right in front of that wood line where those bats were studied. We lived just south of that, in that block. And we stood out back and there was like one bat, it was towards the evening, and then another, and before we knew it, there was like 8 or 9, like more was common, you know. And I said,
See, this is a good area.
this is kind of creepy. I said, what's going on? You know? And it was just more common.
I mean, you know, this is part of putting in a wind farm, is that they're going to do their due diligence and they're going to have surveys done. They do consult with the Fish and Wildlife Service and try to get out of the Fish and Wildlife Service what they would like to see done, but the Fish and Wildlife Service can't force anything to be done. My own preference is that they would go for an incidental take permit in this particular instance, because this is so important. Get that incidental take permit, you have to have what's called a habitat conservation plan, and you have to work very closely with the Fish and Wildlife Service in order to get that. I'm assuming they won't want to, but I would suggest it.
Why are the taller towers more dangerous to them as opposed to the smaller ones?
The thinking is the migratory heights. And again, this is a little bit of speculation because these bats are so small, we can't put like an altimeter on them and really get an idea of how high they do go. I mean, we do know that some bats in the Southwest, based upon radar, are up around 10,000 feet foraging. But what we're thinking is happening here is that as the turbines got larger, the bats are flying, let's say, at 400 to 500 feet. And when the blades were below that, we weren't getting very many mortality. But now as the towers are getting up to 400 feet and then the blades another 150 feet, we're now in the zone where the bats are consistently encountering that. So that's the speculation.
Is that mainly during their migratory time?
Right, and again, the major concern in mortality is in migration, because most of it happens in August and September.